Hey guys, and welcome back to another Warlords of Draenor preview. This time I'm going to be showing you the level 100 Paladin talents. Now the way these talents work is that a few of them are shared between Retribution and Protection, and then of course Holy has got its own set. So Empowered Seals and Seraphim are therefore both Prot and Ret. Anyway, let's get into the Retribution spec. So I've got Final Verdict spec'd in here. Now this is basically just like your Templar's Verdict. It's got a 10-yard range, it does a bit more damage, it still costs 3 holy power, and it's a little bit dull. It does, however, have a pretty decent spell effect. By the way, sorry for everyone else's noise, I don't think some of these spell effects are really working out too well in terms of the noise. It just seems to be an alpha problem. So there you go, as you can see, a hammer sort of whirls in from the back there and hits your target. I think it looks really nice actually. And yeah, definitely feels good to use. I'm just a little bit concerned that, honestly, it's not very transformative, is it? You know? There's no great effect or change to your gameplay, so perhaps that's just going to be a little bit of a dull one to people. Though I suppose there are a lot of players who would just rather have, you know, the easy talent that doesn't really tax your brain and it's hard to go wrong with, and I guess maybe that will do that for people. Anyway, next, let's move on to Seraphim even. This will basically magnify your haste, crit, mastery, multi-strike, versatility, and bonus armor from gear by 30% for 10 seconds. It's rather interesting in that it's really something that will scale pretty well off, increasing item levels. So that's interesting enough. And essentially, it's like Inquisition all over again. Just that, well, in as far as it's a buff that you use, obviously you cannot get 100% uptime because it's a 10-second duration and a 30-second cooldown. But if you can maybe time that with, just your various other abilities, maybe if you could find a way to use Avenging Wrath inside this, then, you know, it's a fun enough ability. It's kind of interesting, so I think that's pretty well done. I am, for some reason, capping Holy Power like an absolute moron. Anyway, that's the deal with that ability. Next, let's move over to Empowered Seals. This basically just means that your Judgment will give you a buff depending on what seal you're using. So, if you are using Justice, then you get a 20% movement speed buff for 20 seconds. If you're using Insight, you get a 3% of your maximum heal, given your maximum health even given back to you every 2 seconds for 20 seconds. If you're using Righteousness, then you get a 30% attack speed buff for 20 seconds. And finally, if you're using Truth, you get a attack power increase of 15% for 20 seconds. So let's whirl on Truth here. For some reason the buff isn't appearing there. It's a bit weird. So you can now see we get Surge of Victory, which increases our strength. Yeah, apparently there are some problems at the minute. Here we get Liedrin's Righteousness. I don't believe like some of these things should stack. If we use Justice, then we get Terulian's Justice, which is the movement speed buff. And then finally, Seal of Insight will give us Uther's Insight, which will give us our health every few seconds, which is pretty cool. Overall, I'm happy enough with these talents. However, a lot of them are very much set it and forget it, you know, with Final Verdict. There is, I suppose, going to be an element of you have to choose perhaps what seal to use in light of this buff, maybe. But overall, I can just see you finding one seal to use and then sticking with that unless you maybe need the movement speed or something. So at least this is a bit interesting, and perhaps it could allow you to seal swap, which is something that hasn't been in the game for a long time. Another thing, by the way, is that I doubt those things are going to stack like they did when I was using them there. Obviously, if they stacked, it would be a little bit strange in terms of gameplay. And then Seraphim is, it's fine. It's just a buff, it's a different way of playing, it's certainly different to Final Verdict. And I'd imagine that because this requires a bit more management, it could be more optimal than Final Verdict, maybe? In which case, I could just imagine people taking this all the time, so I'm not really too sure how these are going to be balanced. Anyway, let's move on to Protection and have a look at their talents. Alright, so here we are in Shatrath City with the tank testing dummies, and I'll be showing you the Protection level 100 talent. 1 second if I can actually just hit the right button. So this is Holy Shield. It's a passive that increases your block chance by 10%, and it also lets you block spells, which is pretty cool. When you do block something, you will deal damage to your attacker. So it's a little bit dull, honestly, not particularly interesting. The next thing we have is Seraphim. Obviously it's the same, but the defensive value of this is that you get 30% of the bonus armor from your gear added. So if you know you're going to be in a sort of decently damaging phase, then you can have 10 seconds of 30% more bonus armor, which should be quite nice. And bonus armor is, of course, far and away the optimal tank secondary, which you'll want to go for. Then with Empowered Seals, well, I think Judgment of Insight is going to help because you will heal 3% of your maximum health every 2 seconds for 20 seconds. So that's just the constant hot that's going to be helping you out. Now, of course, the balance and all that stuff of these is not 100% done, so, I mean, I suppose that's really a given. Anyway, let's walk in here and get attacking these guys. So they're already aggro to me, and you'll just see that they get light damage done to them whenever I block things. Let's go into combat log. Yes, there's Holy Shield doing some damage here. And yeah, it's just going to help you out. I suppose that might help you in AoE tanking. Yeah, in AoEs, because if everything's attacking you, then everything's taking a little bit of damage. And of course, with threat not really mattering too much in Warlords, I suppose that's going to help out. I don't know, it's not particularly interesting, honestly. Also, just, I'm not really playing perfectly here. I don't have my full-on setup from live with action bars. It's all pretty hastily made. Anyway, I'm going to swap over to Holy and show you that talent. Alright then, time to have a bit of a look at the level 100 Holy talents. So first of all, we have Beacon of Faith. This is essentially a second Beacon of Light that you can place, and it operates just like your regular Beacon of Light. Now, unfortunately, I'm not able to use Beacon of Light or Faith on these healing test dummies, so I can't really show it to you exactly, but you get what it is. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. The next one's actually really interesting. It's Beacon of Insight. So, essentially, what you do is you place a Beacon of Insight on one of your allies, and this will increase their healing received from your next direct single-target heal within 1 minute by 30%. And then once that happens, your Beacon of Insight is used. And once it's used, it moves to the next target with, I believe, with the lowest health. Yeah, basically your most injured ally within 40 yards. So, this should actually work out pretty decently because we have a few players here. So if we use it on this guy here, and then we heal him, it should then jump to this person, and when I use it in them, it should jump to this person. Oh no, it jumped to me. Now for some reason, if I try to heal myself, of course because I don't really have any healing to do, oh no, it did jump correctly. Usually it doesn't. So you can see there, it basically jumps around the place from person to person. It really is rather interesting. So if you can actually track this on your UI, then there's always going to be someone who's going to take an extra 30% of a heal. So I'm not really too sure how that would really play out in terms of just an endgame healing scenario, because as I said, I do not heal at endgame. But I think it's certainly an interesting talent. Then finally we have Saved by the Light. Again, I can't show you this because I can't really cast Beacon of Light in anything. But what it does is, when a target drops below 30% health, they get a 30% absorb shield. And that's basically that, and it can only happen once every minute. That's a really handy one if, say, I don't know, you're in a fight and the boss, for some reason, is doing really bursty damage, which shouldn't happen in Warlords, but let's just say hypothetically, something scary happens. Well, if you have this on, then your beacon target, who, say, could be the tank, is going to be okay. It's, I suppose, not particularly interesting, but it's definitely very useful. And yeah, it's just a passive, so as I said, there's maybe not going to be that much gameplay with it. Anyway, that's been a bit of a look at the level 100 Paladin talents. On the whole, I think there are certainly some pretty cool ones in there, and it should be a lot of fun. Hopefully you enjoy them. Anyway, it's still beta, and they could all change, so this is really just an in-progress kind of look. That's it for the video, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.